Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about a few more Python commands. These are commands that you're going to need in order to um, finish up the next problem set, but they're also commands that are going to be really useful for you as you write more complex programs. I was talking about this the other day. If you have an if and you have a loop, um, there's a whole lot that you can accomplish with Python and in other programming languages as well. So what you're learning today is going to be kind of fundamental building blocks of programming. So you'll notice that in the first challenge, I tell you you have to use lists. So that's what I want to talk about first. Lists in Python are very, very similar to lists in Scratch. It's just some numbers or words or letters or something stored in a place that's easily accessible. And like you know how Scratch had numbers next to each of the entries, Python similarly has numbers associated with each entry. It's called an index. Unlike Scratch, your index starts with 0 in Python, whereas with Scratch it started with 1. But basically, all of the items in your list, if you have 10 items, they also have an index number, so you can call a specific entry from your list, just like you did with Scratch. So first I want to show you how you create a list. It's really quite simple. You know how with a variable you would type variable equals and then something, right? Well, with a list, I'm going to say, I'm going to make a list of the months. So I'm going to call my list month list, and I put an equal sign and then brackets, and then whatever I want to be in the list between the brackets. So if I want to start out with an empty list that I add stuff to over time, month list equals left bracket, right bracket, and I'm done. But for this example, I'm actually going to put everything I want in the bracket. So each entry needs to have a quotes around them unless I'm calling a variable. But for our sake, I'm just going to say, I'm going to type out the names of the months. So I'm going to say January and quote, and then do a comma. Each entry needs to be comma separated. February, comma, March, April, May, etc. Oh, I missed one. All right, I think I did that correctly. So there's my month list. And I could call, if I wanted to call just the first entry, I could say print month list, oops, month list 0, and I save that. And there you go. You see I have January. If I wanted to do the 12th month, if I wanted to do December, I would do month list 11, because remember I start at 0. And now you see I have December. And if I want to do range of months, I could do, April to December. I do 3:11. That's going to do everything between the third entry. Oh, and actually, that goes to the end. Sorry. If I do 11, if I do the last entry, I think in the range it doesn't include the last entry. So in other words, the first option here is the one that it starts with, and it's all of them up until this last number. So if I want it to go from 3 all the way to the end, I need to get rid of the number and just do colon without another number. Then it assumes you're going to the end. And likewise, if I want to start at the beginning and go to, I don't know, the 8th entry, then I can just leave the stuff before the colon blank and do the 8th entry. That's called a slice of the list. So you see January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So that's how one way to print out a list. You're going to learn another way to print items from a list right now. So there I've populated my list, and what I want to do is I want to teach you about using for loops. Now, a for loop is kind of like a repeat loop in Scratch. That's basically what it is. What it does is it runs a particular command a certain number of times. And what I'm going to show you is a for loop that runs a print command for every line that I have in this list. Why is that useful? Well, in this particular case, it's useful because it checks each item in my list and it prints it all out for me. Another reason why you might use a for loop is you want to run through a list and compare to see if it has something in it, and if it has that something in it, then you could print it out, say. In your hangman games that you're going to be making later on, you would use a for loop to check to see if any of the letters in the word have a letter that the person types. So if the word is hang and somebody types an N, you'd use a for loop to check to see if there's an N anywhere. Anyways, here is how you use a for loop to print out all the months in this list. So I'm going to do for item in month list. Now, what you'll notice straight off is this is my list. So it's checking for any item in the list. And this means it's just looking through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of the different entries. So for each item in month list, and then I have to indent because with a for, and this is something I discussed the other day, you have to indent in Python. If you don't indent, it's going to give you an error straight off. So for instance, later on we'll talk about ifs, but ifs are the same way. You say if item equals 0, and then you have an indent, and you say what you want to have happen. So for this for, I'm going to say for item in month list, and you see I have a colon here. And then I'm going to say, what do I want to have happen for each item in the list? And I say print item. Item. So what does that do? For each item that's in the month list, I want to print that item. So what I should expect to see is all of the months, one after the other. And that's exactly what happened. January, February, March, April, May, blah, blah, blah. So other things that you can do with that, like let's say, oh, I really don't want them, one on top of the other like that. I want them all next to each other. Well, I told you about this, or I think I listed it in your first challenge document. You can specify end and then put like a little space in quotes, end equals, and what that does is instead of having a return after each item, it has a space instead. And if I say want to have a comma and a space, then I just add a comma before the space. And there you go. Or if I want Mandel and a space, and maybe a space before Mandel so that my name doesn't fit in. There. So there's lots that you can do with that little end command. I just thought I'd show you that really quickly. So that's the basics of a for loop. And that will be useful for you definitely on your first challenge and in subsequent challenges as well. Now let's talk a little bit about conditionals. In Scratch, you guys had that if block, and then you used operators or various things to determine what condition you were checking for. Similarly in Python, you also have an if. You can say, if, let's actually put an if right in here. If item if item equals January, print item. So what is that doing? It's saying, okay, I'm going to check through your month list and let's do February instead of January, just so that you won't think I'm doing anything funky. If item equals February, and you notice here I have two equals. Whenever you're using an if statement, that is not an equals per se. What it is a comparator. So it's comparing. Does this item match what I typed in here? So whenever you're using an if, you're going to have to use two equals. Same thing goes for other conditions where you're using a comparison. Like later on, you'll learn about while loops, and you'll say, you know, while a equals 0, but really it's equals equals. So if item comparator February equals February, print item. So what's it going to do? It's only going to print February, or at least I hope it will. Oh no, what did I do? Oh, right. I have to have my colon, and after the if, it's the same way I have to have a colon after for, and I have to indent my print. So there, let's run that again, and you see there is February. So also like Scratch, you can have ands or ors as well. So let's say I want to print multiple items. I could say if item equals February, or item equals March, or item equals September. Print. So that should print February, March, and September, assuming they all show up in the list, which they do. So there you go, February, March, September. Doesn't print any of the other ones. Other things that you might want to know, I'm going to move away from months now. We'll just do another program. I'll wipe this all out. What else is an if good for? Well, it's good at checking any sort of condition, and if it doesn't match that condition, then you might want to do something different. So for instance, I could say number equals input, type a number, oops, type a number. And then say if number equals 7, print, you guessed, my number. Else, print, you guessed wrong. So hopefully what you see here is that what I'm doing is I'm saying if the user's input is right, then you do this. But if it doesn't, if it's not right, if it doesn't equal 7, then I'm going to do something completely different. And you could even do multiple elses or ifs nested inside of ifs inside of ifs. So let's see if I do this, type a number, 7. Oh, right, because I forgot to put that in quotes. Now that it's in quotes, it'll work. Type number, 7, you guessed my number. And if I type the wrong number, you guessed wrong. And what I could do, like as I said earlier, I can nest an if inside of an if. So I could say else if number equals 105, I could say, there's my colon, print, that's silly, and then else, print, you guessed wrong. So what that's doing is saying, is the number 7? No. Okay. Is the number 104? No. All right, then just print this out. So 105, that's because I typed 104, not 105. This is harder than it looks, believe me. Why do I keep typing 105? 104. That's silly. There you go. There's actually a shorthand if you're going to do else and another if. what you can do is you can type elif. That stands for else if. What that saves you from doing is a bunch of indenting, basically. Because if you kept doing else ifs, what would happen? If you kept doing an else here and an if here, and then an else, and then another if, it would start indenting all the way down the page, and you'd end up with stuff really shifted over and kind of messed up. So the else if saves you, makes your code a little bit neater. So basically, you know, I could do else if number equals 104, print, and then do my else here. Just makes things a little bit cleaner. That last else is still going to have to be indented, but I could have a series of, actually, I could even just do else if here if I wanted to. Sorry, else, there, that's fine. Sorry, there. So, yeah, this the elif is for clean code. That's about it, but can be really useful. Will make things a lot easier for you. One last thing I want to talk about. We've already done everything except for mod. Now, modulo, what that does is it compares. Well, I think I'll just start off by giving you an example. Let's say that I didn't want you to just guess the number 7, but I wanted anything that was an even number. What I could do is I could say number, which is my variable, you know, and this can be anything. It could be pancakes, percent 2. Now what that's checking for is my variable divisible by 2 evenly? And I would have to do if pancakes equals, sorry, if pancakes percent 2 equals 0, then print this, right? Of course, in order to do that, I have to convert pancakes into an integer. And then I have to do the rest. But what this is doing is it's checking to see, okay, is pancakes divided by 2 equals 0? So is there any remainder left when I divide pancakes by 2? So let's say pancakes equals 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2 with no remainder. If I divide pancakes by 5, I can get 2 whole numbers, and then I end up with a half, right? So that would not work. So let's try executing this now. If I type 4, you guessed my number. If I type 8, you guessed my number. If I type 9, I guessed wrong. Now, I would have to change this to an odd number, because if I leave it at 104 and type it, that meets the condition. So I'd have to pick some non-even number, because first it's going to check this if, and it's never going to get down to here if this is an even number. It's going to do this and then quit. I think that's probably enough for you guys today. You're going to need to use all of this, I think, except for the mod to solve the first problem. The mod will solve one of the later problems. If you have any questions, Google's your friend. You can also read through that Invent with Python website I mentioned in the first video. Best of luck.